Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up. Now, I only made 2 videos in the month of January, and that was my 2014 wrap-up and my 2015 goals video that I put up at the beginning of the month. And then the next week I put up a book haul, so if you guys haven't seen either of those videos, feel free to check them out. And then after those 2 videos went up, I basically just stopped making videos. Some stuff happened and I wasn't really in the mood to internet. So those 2 videos were actually recorded before the new year, so I kind of just had those ready and waiting to be put up. Otherwise I might not have made any videos at all this month. Now I'm starting to get back into the swing of real life again, and I'm hoping that next month I'll be able to put up videos regularly again. But I'm not gonna make any promises or guarantees because really I can't at this point, so I'm just going to try my best week by week. However, or maybe because of the fact that I haven't really been on the internet and doing other things in life, I ended up reading a lot of books this month, so I'm just going to run through those books and do a quick review on all of them. The first book that I finished was We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves by Karen Joy Fowler. I actually started this at the end of December and ended up finishing this on the first or second day of the month. This is a book that I ended up enjoying a lot more than I thought I was going to. I started this in like October or something like that, and then I ended up putting it down around like 50 pages in because I could tell I wasn't really in the mood for the book, and I was worried that this book was just not going to be for me, but I ended up picking it up and I enjoyed it a lot. I went into this book pretty blind. A lot of people say that the blurb spoils some things that could be technically true, so I went into this knowing nearly nothing about it other than it was nominated for the Man Booker and it was about kind of like a quirky family. The way this book is set up, you're basically dropped into the middle of a story. The narrator, Rosemary, is basically just telling you about herself and her family life, and so she starts from like where she's at right now and then sort of like jumps back in time to give you some more information about her past. So this book starts off kind of difficult. At least for me it was difficult because you're kind of just stuck into the middle of the story and your narrator is just like talking about all of these characters and you're not really sure what's going on or how all of the pieces fit. But then eventually you do jump back and get more background, and then you see like how it all concludes. So I think that's a little bit why I had a hard time with this in the beginning. But once I got into the story, I got really into it. I think Karen Joy Fowler does a really good job of sort of pulling at your emotions and making you really sympathize with this family, and especially with Rosemary. I also really like what she does with this narration style. When Rosemary's telling the story about her life and her family, she sort of tells these stories about her past, and then when it goes back to present day, she'll talk to other people in her family who may have been there, and she'll realize that there are entire gaps in the stories that she remembers and in the life that she remembers, or there are aspects of the story that she just never knew about because she was a kid and she wasn't exposed to certain things, and so she begins to realize just how flawed her own memory is. So I just thought that whole thing was really interesting. But yeah, in the end I ended up giving this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars because I did really like it and I think it is worth reading. The next book that I read was Yaki Delgado Wants to Kick Your Ass by Meg Medina. This is a young adult contemporary novel. I read this via the Oyster app. I ended up just picking this one up on a whim because I was just in the mood for something that was young adult contemporary, and I really enjoyed this one. The story follows this girl named Pity Sanchez, and she lives in New York and she ends up moving to this new school district. She doesn't really seem to have a lot of friends there, and then one day she finds out that this girl named Yaki Delgado wants to kick her ass basically, and she has no idea why. She's never like talked to the girl, she's never met her before, she has no idea who she is for a while, and eventually she finds out sort of like the reasonings why, and it's about just dealing with like bullying and harassment in schools and just what an effect that can have on a kid, especially a kid who doesn't feel like they have a lot of friends or a lot of people that they can trust or confide in. I like this book because of the way that it handles this topic and the way that it deals with harassment and bullying. One of the things I didn't like so much was the ending because I felt like it was a little bit too nice and neat. So in the end I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. I recommend this a lot, especially if you like young adult contemporary books, and I think that this again just deals with the topics of bullying and harassment really, really well. The next book that I ended up finishing was Vivian Apple at the End of the World by Katie Coyle. I was sent this book for the Reblog book club that is a Tumblr book club. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you may have seen me participate in it, and I was planning on participating in it this time around, but then life stuff happened so I just wasn't able to. But I still really wanted to read the book because I've been hearing really good things about it. But then I read it and I did not like this book, and I don't know if it was me and the place that I was at when I was reading this book, but I just found all of this just so not interesting and not enjoyable. The story follows this girl named Vivian Apple, and there is this cult slash religion that ends up predicting that the rapture is going to happen on this specific date. Vivian Apple's parents are believers in this, but Vivian herself is not. And so on the date of the rapture, Vivian comes home and finds her parents are gone, and there are 2 holes in the roof of her parents' bedroom, and it seems like a lot of believers are now gone. So the story basically just follows Vivian, her friend Harp, and this guy named Peter as they road trip across America to sort of just figure out what they're going to do now and find the truth. I'm like rolling my eyes as I'm saying this description, because in theory this had a lot of potential. The main problem that I had was the fact that I feel like a lot happens, but at the same time nothing happens. Like, there's so many questions that I had throughout this book, and I felt like the answers that they gave were so unsatisfactory, because it seems like a significant portion of the population has disappeared, and sometimes people are responding to that, but other times people are not responding to it, and I don't understand how you could not respond to it or have some sort of reaction to it. Like, it's one thing to believe that this is a hoax and they've done something, but to continue to live your life as if there hasn't been some sort of major effect on the country always seems weird to me. There are parts of the country that are entirely shut down, but then there are other parts of the country that seem to be functioning as if nothing has happened, which doesn't make any sense to me. Just as you continue to go on, I felt like this book was a lot of tell instead of show, and it doesn't explain things very well. I just got really angry at this book. I just couldn't handle it. I just ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 stars, and I was really disappointed. I know this is the first book in a series, but the way that they concluded things and the things that happened in this book, I just wasn't satisfied whatsoever. Oh, this book was so disappointing to me. I'm sorry. And then the next book that I finished was an audiobook called No Man's Land by Asif Mandvi. Asif is a comedian and actor. He has worked on The Daily Show, which is basically where I know him from. And this is a memoir just following aspects of his life, basically up into the point of starting at The Daily Show. So it talks a lot about his childhood and growing up as an immigrant and a non-white person in both England and America, and just contrasting those things and just touching on culture and immigration and racism and race and all of those things. I really enjoyed this book for the most part. There were certain chapters that didn't sit well with me. The way that Asif talks about women sometimes really bothered me. There are a couple of chapters where he talks about girls that he had crushes on, and the way that he talked about them just made me so uncomfortable, and I don't know if he was supposed to be doing it that way or if he's supposed to be talking about it as if he was still like 12 or 13 years old, so he didn't have the maturity to be respectful towards women, I guess, but it just made me so awkward and so uncomfortable. But then there are other chapters that I was like laughing out loud in my car as I was listening to it. So if you like comedy memoirs and you like Asif on The Daily Show, then I definitely recommend this. The next book that I finished was Deep Down Dark by Hector Tobar. The subtitle is The Untold Stories of 33 Men Buried in a Chilean Mine and the Miracle That Set Them Free. This story follows the men who were trapped in the Chilean mine collapse that happened in 2010. If you follow the news, there's a very good chance that you had heard of it. This book I really enjoyed. Hector Tobar works for the LA Times, and so he traveled down to Chile to talk to these men and get their stories, and he does such a good job just covering their stories and what had happened in that mine. It really does feel like you're in that mine with them and you're experiencing these things with them, the trials and just the situations that they're in. He also does a really good job of providing you with background on the story, so even if you don't know anything about the mine collapse, it provides you with really good information about Chile and the government and just procedures about mine collapses and things like that. It also provides you with a pretty decent amount of background on all of the different miners and their families and what's going on. For a book that's only about like 300 and something pages, it gives you a lot. The story basically follows them from like the day the mine collapses to what is pretty close to like present day as of when this book was published. So you get to find out about the collapse itself, how they survived, and what life was like afterwards, which I think was the most interesting part, just seeing how they dealt with their newfound fame and just how people treated them differently and just how they had to learn how to deal with what had happened in the mine and sort of the post-traumatic stress that happens when you deal with such a difficult situation. So I highly recommend this book. It's very, very readable, very, very compelling. If you're someone who doesn't normally read a lot of nonfiction, then this is definitely one to try if you want to try more nonfiction, because you want to keep reading this book. Like, this was a book where I was like sneaking in pages here and there throughout the day because I just really wanted to know, even though I knew what the result was because I remember this mine collapse from a couple years ago, I still wanted to keep reading and I was so intrigued by the story. So even if you know what happened technically, you still want to keep reading to find out what happens. And then the next book that I finished was State of Wonder by Ann Patchett. I love this book. I forgot how much I love Ann Patchett. I read her for the first time in college, and then I basically just haven't read her since college. And I love Ann Patchett's writing style. It's not overly complex, but it does paint a picture just so well. And the way that she just lays out her stories, like, you think her stories are about one thing, and then you see so much like depth and intricacy within all of the characters that then by the end of the story, it's kind of about what you thought it was about at the beginning, but there's so much more that's happening. The story basically follows this woman named Dr. Miranda Singh. She works for this pharmaceutical company, and her colleague has gone into the Amazon to sort of reach this doctor and researcher who's working down in the Amazon who they haven't been able to get in touch with. So her colleague apparently has passed away while in the Amazon. You find this all out like in the first couple pages, so this isn't a spoiler. But the colleague has passed away, and then Miranda goes down to the Amazon to find out what really happened to him. Apparently they buried him in the Amazon, so she wants to try to recover the body if possible for his wife and children who are back home, get his things, and then also to get in touch with this researcher who's really difficult to get in touch with and report back to the company about how things are going with the drug that he's researching. That's kind of like the overarching story that's happening, like the big story, and then like I said, Ann Patchett just weaves so many other stories into this. The story deals with like loss and love and just finding out who you are and dealing with struggles and dealing with your past, and just, oh, it was so good. Like, this book is so compelling. Ann Patchett is such a good writer. If you haven't read anything by Ann Patchett yet, please do it, because her books are so good. And then the final book that I read this month was The Unquiet Dead by Asma Zenat Khan. This is a mystery novel that I ended up picking up because Amanda Nelson over at Book Riot mentioned that this was a really amazing mystery story. This was just released like a couple of weeks ago. This story takes place in Canada, and you are following two detectives, Detective Rachel Getty and Detective Essa Katak. I'm probably mispronouncing that one, but I'm trying my best. They are working on a case where a man has fallen off a cliff and fallen to his death basically, and they are looking into whether or not this was an accident, or it was a suicide, or it was murder. And as they're looking into the case, they realize that the man may be a war criminal who was part of the mass massacres that happened in the Bosnian War in the middle of the 1990s. I'm going to do a full review on this book this week, I promise. I feel like I say that in every wrap up for the past 2 months and I've never done a review. But this one I'm definitely going to review. But if you like mystery novels, pick this up. This might be my favorite read of the month because I was so not expecting this to be as good as it was, and it covers a lot about the Bosnian War that I feel like I at least don't know a lot about. Like, I remember the Bosnian War because I was alive during that time, but I was so young I don't remember a lot of the details of it. So I feel like this book does a really good job of covering all of that, so even if you don't know anything about it, it provides you with enough background, but it doesn't get bogged down in those facts, and the mystery itself is still so compelling. I ended up reading this in like 2 days because I didn't want to put this book down. Pick this book up, especially if you like mystery novels, but a full review will be coming this week. And then finally, because this video is obnoxiously long, the books that I am currently reading are Almost Famous Women by Megan Mayhem Bergman. This is a collection of short stories. I have only read the first story so far. I'm reading like a story a day. But the first story was really good, and I'm excited to see how the rest of them go. This book is historical fiction, and it follows a bunch of, again, almost famous women. So the first one was about these famous Siamese twins, and it sort of just imagines their histories, I believe. So I'm excited to see who the other women are that are covered, and just how Megan Bergman just imagines their lives. The second book is Mr. Fox by Helen Oyeyemi. I knew Helen Oyeyemi had magical realism elements in her book, but I didn't realize how weird this book was going to be. I started this and I'm only about like 75 pages in at the moment, but the entire time I'm just like, what? What? In a good way though. I'm very intrigued by this book and I'm very intrigued to see where it goes. It's so weird that I have no idea what's going to happen next in the best possible way. And then the last book that I am reading is an audiobook, Mr. Kissin Tau by Rob Thomas, which is the second book in the Veronica Mars series, I guess. Unfortunately, this audiobook is not narrated by Kristen Bell, so it doesn't sound like Veronica Mars is telling you the story, but I still really am enjoying it so far. It very much is a testament to the fact that the Veronica Mars voice is more about Rob Thomas's writing style than it is about Kristen Bell herself, and I think the narrator who is doing this book is doing a pretty good job of capturing the tone and the essence of the Veronica Mars books. I'm about 30% into this book, so I'm hoping that I'll have that done relatively soon. And in case you guys don't know already, I have links down below to my Goodreads and other social media, so if you guys are ever interested in what books I'm reading throughout the month, feel free to follow me on there and you can see my progress as it happens. There's a good chance that by the time you watch this video I could be done with one of those books and be on to something else. Who knows? So yeah, that is my crazy long January wrap up because I didn't do any book reviews, but I read a lot of books. If you've read any of the books that I have mentioned, feel free to leave a comment down below letting me know what you guys thought of them, or if you have any questions about any of the books, feel free to leave that down in the comment section as well. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.